Cassandra Peterson spent months stalking the hottest guy at her gym until she discovered he was a she. And that mistake turned into a 19-year secret relationship that she was terrified to let the world know about. Why did this one secret become the most dangerous part of her career? Stay tuned as I'm revealing 12 such weird facts about Cassandra Peterson that even many die-hard fans don't know. 1. The gym revelation. Cassandra Peterson's heart was racing on the treadmill at Gold's Gym, and it had nothing to do with her workout. For months, she'd been stealing glances at him. A tattooed, muscular trainer with long hair spilling from under a knit cap, dark and brooding, commanding enough that crowds literally stepped aside when he crossed the gym floor. Then one day in the early 2000s, they ended up face-to-face in the ladies' room. By this point, Cassandra was already a Hollywood legend. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, had defined her career for 4 decades. She'd spent over 20 years married to her manager Mark Pearson, raised a daughter, and built a merchandising empire around a character whose entire persona revolved around chasing men. Her public image was crystal clear and extremely profitable. Day after day, Cassandra found herself drawn to this mysterious trainer, convinced she was watching the hottest bad boy in Hollywood. When they finally spoke in that bathroom, reality hit. He was actually Teresa T. Weirson, a woman. Cassandra filed this discovery away as an embarrassing mistake, and the two became friends. Both women were watching their relationships crumble. When T showed up at Cassandra's doorstep one rainy night, fresh out of rehab, clutching a trash bag of belongings with nowhere else to go, Cassandra opened the door wide. Picture the scene. The Queen of Halloween and her tattooed trainer roommate, laughing and dancing around the kitchen while dinner simmered, Cassandra's daughter spinning between them. The darkness that had been suffocating that house finally lifting. It looked like friendship. It felt like something entirely different. One night after catching a movie together, Cassandra walked T to her bedroom to say goodnight. Instead, she felt this sudden overwhelming compulsion to kiss her, full on the mouth. Instantly, confusion crashed over her. What the hell am I doing? I've never been interested in women. The chemistry was impossible to deny. They started a relationship. Cassandra made a cold decision. They would keep it absolutely secret. For 19 years, T was publicly her assistant. When Cassandra finally revealed everything in her 2021 memoir, she braced for backlash. Instead, the internet exploded with support. The book became a bestseller, and she learned her fans didn't love her for being perfect. They loved her for being real. 2. The King's Command. At 17, Cassandra Peterson stood backstage at the Dunes Hotel in Las Vegas, wearing her showgirl costume, convinced she'd reached the pinnacle of show business. Then Elvis Presley walked into the room, and within 24 hours, he completely rewrote her life. Cassandra was the youngest showgirl in Las Vegas history, so young her parents had to sign legal documents authorizing her to work. She couldn't enter the casino, couldn't drink, couldn't gamble, but she could dance on stage in her underwear. This was her dream, inspired by watching Anne Margaret in Elvis's film Viva Las Vegas. Elvis came to see her show, renting out the entire venue. Instead of simply watching and leaving, he invited several showgirls back to his suite. She found herself in Elvis Presley's hotel room, the only teenager in the crowd. Elvis paid her special attention precisely because she was 17. They spent the evening and morning together, mostly talking, with some kissing, though his handlers watched carefully. The irony is painful. Cassandra told Elvis she'd accomplished her life's dream. A dream he'd given her through his movie. Elvis looked at this teenager and said, "Your dream is too small, and this place will destroy you." Elvis sat her at a piano and had her sing. His response was a directive. "You have a nice voice. Why don't you become a singer? Take voice lessons. This is no place for a young girl. You need to get the hell out of here. If you stay, you'll end up being the oldest showgirl in Las Vegas." When Elvis Presley tells you to change your life, you listen. She left Vegas, got voice lessons, landed in Italy singing rock in broken Italian, which led to meeting someone who knew Fellini, which led to Roma, which led to LA, which led to the Groundlings, which led to Elvira. Decades later, Cassandra jokes, "I'd now be the oldest showgirl in Las Vegas, so thank you, Elvis. You saved my life." 3. The Federico Fellini Gambit. After Elvis told Cassandra to leave Las Vegas, she landed in Italy as lead singer of an Italian rock band despite barely speaking the language. Then a random encounter turned into a meeting with Federico Fellini. It was the early 1970s. Cassandra was fronting bands called I Latins 80 and the Snails in Rome, performing songs she'd phonetically memorized. She had no plan, just Elvis's words about doing something different. One day, she ran into an acquaintance from her Vegas showgirl days. They reconnected. This acquaintance had appeared in a documentary about Las Vegas showgirls that had caught Federico Fellini's attention. He was actively searching for showgirls to cast in Roma. The acquaintance made an introduction. Cassandra had zero acting experience, no Italian film credits, and could barely communicate with the crew. She got the part purely because she looked like an American showgirl, because that's exactly what she was. The role was tiny, barely a cameo. But now she had a Fellini film on her resume. When she returned to the United States, that single credit opened doors that would have stayed locked for a Vegas showgirl with a rock band side hustle. A throwaway conversation in a foreign country became the seed of her film career. Fellini gave her credibility for The Groundlings, where she developed the character that became Elvira. 4. The Wilt Chamberlain allegation. In her 2021 memoir, Yours Cruelly, Elvira, Cassandra Peterson revealed that basketball legend Wilt Chamberlain raped her at a party. She'd kept the secret for decades, carrying it through 40 years of fame, because speaking up would have meant risking everything. Cassandra was young, trying to make it in Hollywood, attending parties where powerful men circulated and opportunities could appear or disappear based on who liked you. Wilt Chamberlain was a giant literally and culturally, a man whose fame gave him access to anyone and anything. At this party, Cassandra was just another young woman in the room, trying to network, trying to survive. She didn't expect to become a target. Cassandra crossed paths with Chamberlain. What happened next wasn't flirtation. She found herself in a situation where his physical power, his fame, and his sense of entitlement converged into violence. She couldn't fight back. The physical disparity was too great, the social power imbalance too severe. The assault happened. When it was over, she was left with an impossible choice. If she reported it, who would believe her? She stayed silent. She calculated the cost. Accusing a beloved sports icon would make her the story, would turn her into the woman who accused Wilt Chamberlain, would derail her career before it started. The irony is sickening. Wilt Chamberlain famously claimed in his autobiography that he'd slept with 20,000 women, a boast celebrated as legendary prowess. How many of those 20,000, Cassandra wondered decades later, had actually said yes? Cassandra buried the memory and kept building her career. The secret stayed with her, a weight she carried through every interview, every appearance, every moment of Elvira's rise. When she started writing her memoir, she had to decide: include this or protect herself one more time. Every draft felt incomplete without it. She wrote it down, then deleted it, then wrote it again. The fear remained. What if people didn't believe her? Chamberlain had died in 1999, so he couldn't defend himself. Some would accuse her of attacking a dead man who couldn't respond. She also knew that staying silent meant letting the secret define her instead of her defining how the story was told. In 2021, when the memoir was published, she included the allegation clearly, directly, without sensationalizing it. The revelation didn't destroy her. The internet didn't call her a liar. Instead, the response was largely supportive. People believed her, thanked her for speaking up, acknowledged that this violence had been normalized for far too long. Cassandra didn't write it for vindication or revenge. She wrote it because carrying someone else's shame for 40 years was a different kind of death. Wilt Chamberlain took something from her that night, but she refused to let him take her voice forever. The memoir gave her back control. The assault happened. She survived. And now, finally, it was her story to tell, not his secret to keep. 5. The Gilligan rejection. In 1981, Cassandra Peterson made it to the final 2 for Ginger Grant in the 3rd Gilligan's Island TV movie. Then they dropped her, and that rejection saved her career. Cassandra was perfect. The look, comedy chops from The Groundlings, the showgirl background. Getting cast would mean steady work, national exposure. She waited by the phone. Then the call came. They'd chosen the other actress. Without that job, she was back to square one. When her agent called about a weird horror host audition for a local TV station, she was desperate enough to consider it. The irony, the role she did get paid $350 a week, aired at midnight on one Los Angeles station and was called A Car Wreck. The role she didn't get was a guaranteed hit. Yet 40 years later, No one remembers the Gilligan's Island movie, and Elvira became a household name. Cassandra improvised at the KHDV audition, pulling out a Valley Girl vampire from the groundlings. She and Robert Redding created Elvira in a rush. Black dress, Ronnie Spector hair, impossible cleavage. The show was a train wreck at first. Then Johnny Carson saw it and invited Elvira to The Tonight Show. The car wreck became a phenomenon. The rejection forced her into total creative freedom. The worst rejection delivered the greatest opportunity. 6. The $350 mistake. Cassandra Peterson nearly missed the audition that would define her career because she was on her honeymoon. When she showed up and improvised a Valley Girl vampire, she got the job. For $350 a week, she had no idea she'd just signed the worst contract of her life. KHJ-TV was reviving a late-night horror show. Cassandra had never hosted anything, never worked in television, and had zero leverage. When they offered $350 weekly for a midnight slot, she said yes immediately. The show was a disaster. Critics called it a car wreck. Viewership was abysmal. Then Johnny Carson saw it. He invited Elvira to The Tonight Show. Suddenly, merchandising deals, licensing opportunities, endorsements flooded in. Cassandra went back to renegotiate. What nobody tells you, when Cassandra signed that deal, she'd signed away all merchandising rights. KHJ-TV owned Elvira. She just performed her. She had no legal claim to the character. Year after year, she negotiated at every renewal, asking for rights to sell merchandise. Have some control. KHJ-TV refused every time. Cassandra and Mark played the long game, negotiating small concessions, waiting for weakness. Then the network got caught illegally funneling money to Nixon's campaign. Their financial situation became precarious. By the late 1980s, she had leverage. She demanded complete ownership. The name, the image, everything. The network agreed. The woman who'd started at $350 a week eventually owned one of pop culture's most recognizable characters because she refused to accept that was all she deserved. 7. The cease and desist. It's 1981. Cassandra Peterson is on set at KHJ-TV Costume Perfect. Camera's about to roll. Then the door bursts open. Stop the show. A lawyer for Vampira has sent a cease and desist letter. They can't use the name. Everything stops. The plan: revive Vampira's show with a younger host. Mila Nurmi was supposed to get a producer credit. Cassandra thought she'd play Vampira's daughter. Everything seemed ready. Cassandra was moments from filming. Mila Nurmi's attorney blocked everything. The producers panicked. Crew on the clock. A time slot to film, no show. They couldn't use the Vampira name. They needed a new name immediately. Someone suggested throwing names into a hat. One got drawn: Elvira. They changed the name, kept everything else, and filmed. The irony? The legal threat that nearly killed the show actually created Elvira. If Nurmi had never sent that cease and desist, Cassandra would have played someone else's character, forever in Vampira's shadow, with no ownership. The show launched as Elvira's Movie Macabre in September 1981. Nurmi watched and was furious. The black dress, the long hair, the campy commentary, even unpleasant dreams echoing her bad dreams, darlings. She felt replaced. She was living in poverty. She placed an ad. Vampira to sue Elvira. Interested attorneys inquire below. By 1982, she launched a $10 million lawsuit. Cassandra borrowed thousands for legal fees. Some days, Nurmi didn't even show. The judge ruled in Cassandra's favor. Having a similar look didn't constitute copyright infringement. The lawsuit ended. The feud didn't. For 2 decades, Vampira haunted Elvira, showing up with hired thugs, sending nude photos to executives to sabotage deals, trashing her in interviews. The cease and desist created an enemy who would never forgive her. But it gave Cassandra complete ownership of a character entirely hers. And Elvira, the name chosen in panic, became more famous than Vampira ever was. 8. The Romanian gamble. After Elvira, Mistress of the Dark in 1988, Cassandra Peterson spent years trying to get a sequel made. Every studio said no. So in 2000, she and Mark Pearson financed it themselves for under $1 million and shot in Romania. The first film had been a cult hit. A sequel seemed guaranteed. But studios turned them down. The character was too niche. Cassandra was in her late 40s. Hollywood's message: you're too old, move on. She wasn't ready. They set an insane budget under $1 million. Shooting in the US would blow that immediately. They found Romania, cheap labor, gothic locations. Neither had produced an independent film at this scale. They were learning on the fly. Picture this: Cassandra filming Elvira's haunted hills in Transylvania on a shoestring budget with a Romanian crew, many of whom had never heard of Elvira. They finished filming. Almost no budget remained for marketing. Without promotion, the film would disappear. They screened Elvira's haunted hills at AIDS charity fundraisers across America, raised money while introducing the film. Something unexpected happened. Fans saw Cassandra out of character for the first time, the woman behind the wig. The response was overwhelming. Word of mouth built. On July 5th, 2002, the film had its Hollywood premiere. The real validation came in 2003. The film screened at Cannes. The movie every studio rejected ended up at Cannes. It didn't make blockbuster money, but it proved Cassandra didn't need Hollywood's permission. Those charity screenings created something she'd never had: a direct relationship with her fans. For the first time in 2 decades, people saw Cassandra Peterson, not just the wig. That vulnerability made them love Elvira more. 9. The Burning. On Good Friday 1953, 18-month-old Cassandra Peterson reached for a pot of boiling water on her stove in Manhattan, Kansas. Third-degree burns covered 35% of her body. Doctors told her parents she wouldn't survive the night. She survived. Barely! 3 months of skin grafts, a toddler immobilized in bandages, enduring pain most adults couldn't withstand. She lived, but the scars stayed. Permanent! Visible! Isolating! While her sisters played with Barbies and wore pink dresses, Cassandra built model kits of Frankenstein and Dracula. She obsessed over Vincent Price and horror movies. At 8, she watched House on Haunted Hill and felt something click: comfort in creatures who were misunderstood, scary on the outside, but human underneath. Her family didn't get it. She felt like the weird kid in a normal world. At 14, she left home. Here's the connection no one makes. The boiling water that nearly killed her became Elvira's origin. Not directly, deeply. The scars made her feel like a monster, so she learned to love monsters. The isolation made her an outsider, so she created a character who was an outsider but owned it with humor and sexuality. When Cassandra became Elvira, scary and sexy and self-aware, she was channeling every ounce of that childhood feeling of not belonging, except now she controlled the narrative. The misfit became the icon. The girl who felt ruined became the woman who chose to be unforgettable. The burning didn't define her. It gave her the fire. 10. The nude photos. In her 20s, Cassandra Peterson posed nude for a husband and wife photography team who promised it was just a test shoot for Penthouse. They lied. Decades later, when Cassandra was negotiating a major cartoon deal, someone mailed those nude photos to the network executives, and the deal evaporated. Cassandra was young, broke, and hustling in the 1970s, doing whatever gigs came her way to survive. When the photographers approached her, they were convincing: standard industry practice, just test shots. Nothing would be published without her consent. She trusted them. She needed the money. She posed. The photos disappeared, and she never heard about them again. She assumed they'd been discarded, forgotten. Cassandra built her career over 2 decades. Elvira became a massive brand. By the late 1980s, she wanted to expand beyond late-night TV. She started negotiating with a major network to create an animated Elvira cartoon series. Saturday morning programming, massive reach, merchandising gold. This was a family-friendly network with strict standards. The negotiations were going well. Contracts were being drafted, the deal close to done. What nobody tells you about Hollywood in the 1980s, your enemies didn't just badmouth you, they weaponized your past, dug up vulnerabilities, and mailed them to anyone who could destroy your career. Then an envelope arrived at the network's headquarters. When executives opened it, they found full nude photographs of Cassandra from that 1970s shoot. No explanation, just the images. The network panicked. The cartoon deal was killed immediately. No discussion, no second chances. Cassandra was blindsided. She demanded to know who sent them. The answer came through whispers. Vampira had obtained the photos and sent them to sabotage the deal. Mela Nurmi, still furious about losing the lawsuit, still living in poverty while Elvira thrived, had turned to extralegal warfare. The photos weren't the only tactic. Vampira had hired thugs to show up at Elvira events to harass and intimidate her. One incident went further. At one event, someone physically pushed Cassandra, and when she turned around, she recognized them as one of Vampira's associates. The lawsuit had ended in court with Cassandra's victory. The war never ended. Vampira spent the rest of her life trying to destroy what she couldn't have. Those nude photos were her most effective weapon, not because they were shameful, but because they gave gatekeepers an excuse to reject Cassandra. She never got the cartoon deal, but she learned something crucial. Own your past before someone else weaponizes it. When she wrote her memoir in 2021, she included the story herself on her own terms. No more grenades. No more secrets. Just the truth. 11. The unpleasant dreams. When Cassandra Peterson and Robert Redding had 24 hours to create Elvira's look in 1981, their first idea, a pink nightgown inspired by Sharon Tate, got rejected. The director's directive, make it all black. Cassandra thought it was boring. Together, they wanted something fresh, different from every other horror host. The pink nightgown felt playful, unexpected. The director shut it down. Too soft, not scary enough. It's so boring. Morticia Addams, we've seen this 1,000 times. They had one day. Robert got to work. Remember this. Robert based Elvira's hair on Ronnie Spector from the Ronettes. That reference would become a legal landmine. Robert designed a skin-tight black dress with a plunging neckline as low as possible without violating broadcast standards. He created towering hair based on Ronnie Spector. Cassandra modeled makeup after Hecate from Macbeth. When they put it together, something clicked. She added her Valley Girl voice, sarcastic quips, self-aware humor. Then they needed a closing line. Cassandra chose Unpleasant Dreams. The first episode aired with that line. Vampira had closed her show saying, "Bad dreams, darlings." The similarities were impossible to ignore. All black, long, dark hair, campy commentary, ironic twist on sweet dreams. What Cassandra thought was fresh looked, to Vampira's lawyers, like theft. The boring costume became evidence in a $10 million lawsuit. The look that made Elvira iconic also made her a target. 12. The 15-year secret. Cassandra Peterson spent 15 years trying to write her memoir. She'd tell wild stories to friends. Elvis, Fellini, Robert De Niro, John Voight, the Vampira lawsuit, and everyone said, "You have to write this down." She couldn't. Because the biggest story, the one that explained everything else, was the relationship with T, and revealing that could destroy Elvira. By the mid-2000s, Cassandra had 40 years of insane material. A near-death childhood accident, teenage showgirl stories, encounters with Hollywood legends, courtroom battles, self-financed films, building a brand from nothing. Publishers were interested, fans were asking, the stories were there, but every time she tried to write, she hit a wall. How do you write an honest memoir when the most important relationship of your life, 19 years with Teresa Weirson, has to stay hidden? Cassandra started writing. Every draft felt dishonest, sanitized, like she was performing on the page. She'd stop, delete everything, try again months later. The problem was always the same. Elvira's brand was built on being always after guys. Cassandra's public persona was carefully straight. Coming out would mean admitting she'd been lying to fans for 2 decades. But was it even lying if she'd genuinely been married to a man for 25 years before meeting T? She spiraled. Was she gay? Bisexual? Just in love with one person who happened to be a woman? The irony is painful. The woman who'd spent 40 years playing a character defined by fearless sexuality was terrified to reveal her actual sexuality. Elvira could be outrageous, campy, in your face. Cassandra had to stay silent? Publishers kept asking. Cassandra kept stalling. 15 years passed with nothing finished, just fragments and false starts. Then COVID-19 hit in 2020. All her gigs were canceled. She was trapped at home with nothing but time and her unfinished memoir. T didn't want to be public. Cassandra had to convince her that staying hidden was worse than the risk. T agreed, reluctantly, on one condition. Cassandra couldn't turn her into a spectacle. Cassandra wrote the relationship as what it was, a love story, not a scandal. Finishing the book meant confronting the fear that had paralyzed her for 15 years. Would my fans hate me? Would they feel lied to? Would they call me a hypocrite and abandon me? She wrote it anyway, shaking. When the memoir was about to publish in September 2021, the panic attack started. She'd wake up thinking, people are gonna hate me. Then Yours Cruelly, Elvira came out. The internet didn't explode with hate. It exploded with love. The book became a New York Times bestseller. Fans thanked her for being honest. LGBTQ communities celebrated her. The people who'd been telling her for 15 years to write this book, they were right. The secret she'd been protecting wasn't shameful. It was the most human part of her story. Elvira was a character. Cassandra was real, and the fans loved the real version even more. The 15-year delay wasn't wasted time. It was the time she needed to become brave enough to tell the truth. And when she finally did, she discovered something she should have known all along. People don't love you for being perfect. They love you for being honest. The 19-year relationship that nearly stayed hidden forever became the reveal that made the memoir unforgettable. Cassandra Peterson's life isn't just a collection of weird stories. It's the journey of someone who turned every disaster, rejection, and secret into fuel. From near death to lawsuits to hidden love, she survived it all and built an icon that no one could kill. Elvira didn't make her strong. She was already unstoppable. If you liked this video, you may also like other videos in our channel about beautiful ladies of yesteryear.